Victor Alpha 3, Hotel Echo Sierra, testing for the net.
You and I have made it. Good evening.
No, thank you very much. Is that you, Reg?
No, Jim. Victor Echo 3, Juliet India Whiskey. Just keeping it alive in Mississauga.
Good evening, Jim. All right, well, we're just getting the stream started here. Just wanted to make sure my audio was routed correctly. Standing by for the top of the net. VE3GAW, VA3HES.
You know, before you joined this crowd, we used to have a newsletter. Ed, the poet's voice, was doing the newsletter. What have you found? Hello, hello. Don't want to talk. Okay, bye-bye. Anyway, Ed was doing the newsletter, but he wasn't getting support from the members. But I'm very good that you, sir, have taken up a value part of our radio club. But, you know, we used to have a newsletter, and Ed just realized life was too short. The amount of hours he spent doing a newsletter.
Yeah, QSL, laying out a newsletter and being the editor for one of those is, it's a bit of a thankless job, and it is certainly a heck of a lot of work. Even if you were to try to do it digitally these days, it's still just a task to gather all that information and content and pictures and such and put it together. But thank you, Jim. Thank you. I'm very glad to be part of the club and to do whatever I can to advance the hobby. Back to you.
Well, you're doing your part, and a great thing. Anyway, we'll wait around for what, 1 minute?
Yeah, it looks like we got about a minute to go there, Jim.
Well, anyway, welcome everybody from the Ham Conference. Welcome. And if you're an early check-in, you can text us. But I'm not taking short times over Echolink. It's really wasting the time of the net. Anybody who wants to be an early check-in, feel free to text us. Okay. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, amateur radio operators, people running crystal radios that can get FM. I'd say good evening, good evening. My name is Jim, and I am your controller tonight for the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club Tuesday Night Net. The net is available on the club's VHF repeater, Echo Link 9229. We start at 8:30. 01:30 UTC. We last about an hour, and if we're in emergency daylight savings time, well, maybe the times are shifted by an hour. To participate in that locally, you can do so on the VE3MIS repeater, 145 430 600 negative 103 tone, Echo Link Conference 9229. Or several of the conferences connected to TechLink. And because of the fact that we're using digital, we need to leave a couple of seconds space because it just takes that much time for all the computers to go, hello, and then the other computer goes, hello. Anyway, this net spans Greater Toronto by radio and internet via Echolink. It's being streamed on YouTube. Check out VE3MIS. And you can hear yourself on YouTube. We are the nets on the live stream playlist on the VE3 Mike India Sierra VE3MIS YouTube. And if you would like to find more about the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club, visit our website. And here's where my notes are wrong. VE3MIS.ca. And I'm on QRZ at VE3JIW. I'm Jim. Anyway, the purpose of that, we share views and news on topics of the day. We try and avoid politics and religion. Standing by. And people listening and others can get some experience on how a net might run. All check-ins are welcome. We invite people from outside our region. And somebody wants to call me on the phone to tell me bad news, and I'll say, hello, bad news. See, they don't want to talk. Nothing. Isn't that fun these days? You get these phone calls and nobody talks. Anyway, going to do check-ins for RF, and then I'm going to do Echolink, and I'm going to do some short times. And I'm going to do some announcements. Of course, I don't have any announcements. But anyway, I don't have a question for tonight because I couldn't think of a single question. Maybe one of the first or second callers will suggest a question. Anyway, is there anybody who has any announcements for the net? Any announcements for the net?
Victor Alpha 3, Alpha Zulu Alpha. Over to you, Jim.
Brian, Victor Alpha 3, Alpha Zulu Alpha, go ahead.
On net control, this is VE3 today. Jim, I just had a little reminder here. There is a club meeting, a general members meeting this Thursday from, I guess it starts at, they've got it here 7 to 7:30 p.m., but it's a little bit longer than that. I think it starts at 7:30 and usually goes for an hour and a half or so. But there is a members meeting, and it is via Zoom, and that's happening this Thursday. Over to you, VE3 today, over to net control.
Sorry to change your announcement, but the club meeting starts at 7:00. 7 o'clock for the club. Allow us to get club business out of the way and join the Burlington Arc Club at 7:30.
Net control, VE3 today. Okay, Jim, good. Okay, good. Thanks for the clarification. I can see I didn't know how to read that in the email, but thanks. We'll pass it back to you. VE3 today. Over to net control.
Yeah, for people listening on the long range of the world, Toronto is on North Shore of Lake Ontario. West of Toronto is Mississauga. West of that would be Oakville, and then Burlington. It's about 20 miles. But the Burlington Amateur Radio Club has mixed with the Mississauga Club, and they do nets on Thursdays, and they allow the Mississauga and Burlington members are joining on Zoom because they have interesting speakers, news about amateur radio, you know, how to string a wire, how to electrocute yourself the right way, so that our meetings for Mississauga have moved early to 7 o'clock so that we can join with the Burlington people at 7:30. I don't know what the topic of tonight's meeting is, or Thursday's meeting, but anyway, it's just the fact that two great radio clubs realizing that we're using Zoom and we should get together. Any other announcements? Okay, I'm going to take short times, but I'm not going to take short times from people who can text us on Zello or Echolink. If you can text us, don't bother with being a short time. Short time is traditionally for mobiles moving through the area or people who have truly somewhere to be in the next 10 minutes. Any short time check-ins? Okay, well, we've blown through the short times because Gord's not available, and who is out of Texas? HCU? But anyway, from the general Toronto area, RF check-ins. Anybody would like to check in on RF? Come now. I am Victor Echo 3 Juliet India Whiskey, running the 2-meter net. Any radio check-ins from the Mississauga area?
Victor Alpha 3 Hotel Echo Sierra, Mark.
Brian.
Victor Echo 3 Delta Bravo November, Don.
Victor Echo 3 Yankee Sierra November, Satya.
Victor Echo 3 X-Ray Bravo Hotel, Brian. Peter.
I got AZA, I got DBN, I got, shoot, I can't read it on my screen, but Sasha, I got you, and I got, who else did I get? I got 4 people. XTH. Didn't hear HES.
Victor Alpha 3 Hotel Echo Sierra.
Victor Echo 3 Whiskey Yankee Delta, Peter.
VE3MIS.
I love these things. I got HES, and I got somebody else, and I can't remember it. And when I unkeyed, I didn't have my transmit, and I had to restart the thing. So anyway, I got 6 check-ins. First one I heard was AZA, VA3 AZA. Come ahead.
VE3 VE3JW. This is VA3AZA. And good evening, Jim. Good to hear from you. Nice to hear everyone on the net. I think Peter VE3WID was in there, and he's in Brampton, VE3WID. Not much to report tonight. I actually had a question. I don't know if it was a question for the net, but, well, I guess anyone can try to answer it. But I was wondering whether there is a digital voice calling frequency on 2 meters. For some reason, I seem to think it's 1455625. I have no idea whether that's right. I don't know where I got it from. I probably read it on the internet somewhere. But of course, 1465520 is the FM calling frequency. Is there a digital voice calling frequency on 2 meters? Anyway, there's a question for us. Maybe it's an easy one to answer. VA3A today, over to net control.
Everybody else who would like to join us through the net, is there a digital voice call channel? So that would be the question for tonight. And VE3, DBN, Don, good evening.
This is Victor Echo 3, Delta Bravo November, Don in Kleinburg, Ontario. Don't have a great deal to report tonight. Just wanted to give you another bean for the pot. But I do have a question, and not meant to be the question of the evening, but I have an ICOM 5200 that I'm using as a base station for VHF and UHF. And I'll be darned, I can't find anywhere to connect a ground wire to it. I'm wondering if somebody might have an idea as to where I can connect the ground to it, or if I even need to ground it. I don't know. But anyway, that's my question. Other than that, it's been kind of cold and miserable here in Kleinburg today. We had a great weekend, and we got an awful lot accomplished outside, but today was not one of those days. And I guess that's about all I have for now. I'll stick around for the second round, and I'll turn it back to you.
Does anybody have a good idea to how to connect the ground? I mean, I would say any screw in the back of the radio, you could loosen off the screw and then put a ground wire on it. But anybody else have an idea on grounding a radio? Well, Don, I would say that before the coax enters your house, there should be a ground wire. Okay. A lot of people who do a big-ass install put a metal plate on the wall of their house, and every coax terminates on a fitting on that plate. And that plate has a really good ground wire running. And then the coax comes up to the shack, and there's a ground wire there. The electrical code says every cable coming into your house should be grounded. You know, the wire for your water, the pipe for your water, the pipe for your natural gas, your cable TV, any suppressors on your telephone system. All these grounds should be run to one common ground point. And the first ground for your antenna should not be the radio. It should be where the wires come into the house. The electrical code covers grounds. But, Don, grounding the radio as the first point of ground is not the best place. The cables for your antenna should be grounded before they come in your house. I don't know if you're aware of that. And, I mean, it's a difficult thing to do, to get all these ground wires and getting everything commonly connected. But I tell you that I had my electrical ground established. I had disconnected every wire coming into my house. So I had no power. I had no fuse panel. And I disconnected my furnace, and I had the wire loose in the electrical box that fed my furnace. And I went and grabbed a coffee or something, and I came back downstairs, and I could see this little blue arc. The wire's sitting loosely in a box, and I can see this little blue arc. And I'm trying to figure where would I be getting the electricity to have this little blue arc. And I realized that what I had was a voltage difference between my electrical ground connected to my water pipe and the gas line component was not grounded, but electrical connection went from my gas line through my furnace back to the electrical. And there was a small potential difference between my electrical ground, my water pipe, and my gas pipe. And that's why every wire coming to your house should be commonly connected. But I walk down and I see this blue arc on a loose wire in an electrical box, and I'm trying to figure where's the electricity coming from, because I had my electrical service disconnected. I shouldn't have had any electricity coming in my house, but no, there was a electrical potential difference between my water pipe and my gas pipe.
Victor Echo 3, Delta Bravo November. It's Don here. Suddenly there came up a lot of static and whatever on the radio, and I couldn't hear what you were saying at the end. But at any rate, my coax cables for UHF and VHF and for HF are all grounded on the outside before they even come in the house. I was just talking about having a ground from the radio itself, just to ground the radio. My 7300, I've got a ground on there, and it is grounded out and everything, but I just didn't have a spot for this one. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, and I'll be around for the second call.
Very good, Don. Sorry about the noise, and there was somebody who was coming trying for RF, and they were just too noisy to hear. But yeah, if you've already got grounds established where the wires enter the house, somehow getting a screw onto the chassis of that radio and connecting it up to ground wire and running that ground wire to the same point for the other grounds. You do want all your grounds to come to a common point.
Don here. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later.
Well, my list disappeared. But I do know that WYD wanted to check in RF. So let's go to WYD through RF. Good evening.
Hello, Jim, and everyone on that. This is Peter, VE3WYD. Interesting conversation about grounding up there in Kleinberg. I believe his radio is a mobile, the 5200, and I'm running right now a Yaesu mobile, and I don't have it grounded, the chassis or anything, but it's a mobile unit, and I have the home antenna, which is grounded outside before it comes in the house, and I haven't had any issues yet, but interesting topic. Wondering to go deeper on that, and I was also wondering about the digital calling frequency, if anyone knows that. Brian AZA, I'm interested in that too. Back to the net. This is VE3WYD.
I lost my list, so I'm going to call for RF check-ins after this, but Hotel Echo Sierra. I definitely know that you wanted to check in. Good evening. VE3HES, VE3JIW with the Mississauga Net.
VE3JIW, VA3HES. Good evening, Jim, and all on the net tonight. Mark here in Mississauga. We are live on YouTube. Just search for VE3MIS in YouTube, and you'll find tonight's live stream and a playlist with all the archived previous Tuesday night nets. I'd go hunting for any screw on the radio that has continuity to the negative side of the DC lead. That would probably give you a good indication that it's a ground. It's a good idea to do it, and you're correct about bringing all the grounds to one common point. There's a guy on YouTube, if you search Mike Holt, he's a bit of an expert in the electrical code, and there's a YouTube video that he put out that actually talks about the proper way of following the National Electrical Code for grounding your ham radio stuff. I'm going to drop for a second. I'm not sure about the digital channels or part of the band in 2 meters for digital modes, but I know if you go to the RAC website, there's the official band plan for Canada that's got some notes about that stuff. And one other thing of note for the club, we are starting to plan a field day. Yes, we are going to have an in-person field day for the club. Look out for a message on our group's IO reflector. Myself, Joseph Bondi, VE3, why am I? GKT, starting to blank on his call, along with Mike Wild and a few others are starting to plan out field day, and we'd love to have you come out. That's all for now, Jim. Back to you, and I'll be around for the second round.
Yeah, well, field day. Good or bad, my mother is in a nursing home that's across the road from our Mississauga Road field day location, log house, so, and that's good. No, in the United States, they use the National Electrical Code. In Canada, it's funny, and they call it the Canadian Electrical Code, Part 2. I don't know why they call it Part 2, but that's what they call it. I mean, outside of my house, I had my water pipe clamp. I had a clamp on my gas pipe, and I had the 2 bare number 6 copper wires coming back to my electrical panel, and then I went outside the house, and I put in 2 10-foot ground rods, and they had to be like 10 feet apart. I mean, I got that stuff in, so if I wanted to do my radio ground, I know where to run the wires. But in Canada, it's the Canadian Electrical Code, Part 2. Don't know why it's called Part 2. U.S. of A, the NEC, same rules on ground. The funny thing in the U.S., and maybe in Canada, is Home Depot sells 8-foot ground rods. 8-foot ground rods are not approved. Okay, they are substandard. If you're going to put in ground rods, you need the 10-foot rods. I have this honking big-ass drill, and it has a mode that can just go vertically, you know, it's a rotary hammer. I made an adapter. It involved a broken drill bit and a pipe fitting that would sit over a standard 10-foot ground rod, and it would pound the ground rod down into the earth. ZTZ borrowed it, and it made his installation of a ground rod easy, because I remember doing my ground rods. You know, you have a tape measure, and you measure the ground rod, and you swing a hammer 50 times, and you look at your tape measure, and you moved an eighth of an inch. It is very difficult driving a ground rod down. People of Mrs. Club, remember, I have a tool It will drive a ground rod down very quickly, and I can loan it to you or let you borrow it. But John, your ground wire connection could be any chassis screw on the radio that you take the screw out, and then you have a ring fitting on the wire, and then you put the screw back, and then you've got a connection for the ground wire. Because the mobile radios do not have a separate ground connection. Okay, so my list disappeared. Who did I miss on RF check-ins? Who did I miss on RF check-ins for the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club 2-meter net?
Victor Echo 3 Yankee Sierra November Satya.
Victor Echo 3 X-Ray Bravo Hotel, Brian.
Victor Echo 3 with Delta Peter. I don't know if I got through the first time.
Who is that short timer on RF? And we're not into Echo Link yet, Gary.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Sasha, YFN, I'll let you take it away. Yankee Sierra November, Sasha to the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club 2-meter net. Please, I'll be listening.
Good evening to you, Net Control, Jim. This is Satya, Victor Echo 3 Yankee Sierra November. Good evening to everyone on this frequency. Nothing to share from my side. Good signal, we copy you good. I am from Mississauga, and 73 to you, and have a good night. Net Control, this is VE3MIS.
I'm going to turn it over to XPH in a second, but who is the other noisy station on the radio? Maybe somebody can copy? Okay, Brian, VE3XPH, good evening.
VE3JW, this is VE3XPH, Brian, and good evening, Jim, and hello to everybody on the net. Hope everybody's keeping well. Good to hear and to see some of the regulars on Echolink. And, well, I don't really have much other than, as far as grounding goes, what I've done, be it right or wrong, I have about a 6-foot ground rod driven in outside the house, and to that I got a box with the arresters attached to it, and there's a ground bus inside the box, so all the arresters are attached directly to the ground rod, and then there's a 0.6 copper that runs into the house to a bus bar in the shack, and then all of my gear is grounded to that, so it's one continuous ground to that ground rod. I don't have that ground connected to the electrical ground, so they are two separate grounds. Most of the gear, well, some of the gear does have a U-ground and is connected. Haven't had any ground loop problems, so everything seems to be quiet and seems to work well for me. But that's just, like I say, how I've done it, right or wrong. It seems to work. So if it works, I'm happy. VE3JW, VE3XBH.
Well, in commercial installations, were they running ground rods all through an area. Where they join the ground rods, they put this clay pot around the wires and they fill it with thermite. It's, I don't know, it's slow burning gunpowder. It's called thermite. Anyway, they get a lighter and they light the thermite and it melts metal, and the two wires that are joined are then melted together as a joint. The secret to grounding and joining everything together is to not have any resistance between the different points. I mean, if you had a lightning strike and it hit your electrical service as it comes into the house, and Brian, your service is underground, so you don't count. But people like me have their service in the air. But if a lightning strike were to be on the electrical, all my electrical stuff would be lit up by lightning. And if I didn't have all the ground wires together, or I had a tiny bit of resistance between the connections, I would have a tremendous amount of voltage between the different ground points. And that's the trick to grounding, is trying to achieve 0 ohms between every ground point, so that if one particular part of the wires outside your house get hit, there is no electrical potential between the different ground points. And that's why you try and run all the grounds to one common point. It's a really big on a homeowner's budget. You go to a cell site or a transmission site and you look at the amount of technology and work they have spent on their grounding, and you realize, I can't afford that. That's the problem as a ham, trying to get a grounding system that is up to the standard that a communications site can do, because they might spend $20,000 or $50,000 on their grounding, and that's really hard for an amateur to do.
Well, I don't think
the advantage that us as amateurs can do is we can have a window a little bit open between our chairs. And if we hear thunder and lightning, we can disconnect our radio.
Would use. So I think you just do
I've
the
said
best
this
you
to
can.
many people. If you aren't using your radio, disconnect the coax. John, VE3DBN, you have experience with a nearby lightning strike, and you didn't lose any radios. I think maybe Don, VE3DBN, we should hear from him about a nearby lightning strike that didn't destroy his radios. Anyway, I'm guessing Don is busy. Anyway, Don had a lightning strike that hit somewhere near his house. But Don had his radios disconnected, so he didn't suffer loss of any of his great radios because they weren't connected at the time of the lightning strike. Mr. Brown, I can't remember Rick Brown's call sign, but he had a lightning strike that took out his satellite, his microwave, a couple of radios, and it wasn't a direct hit to his antennas, but he lost 8 or 10 appliances that his insurance company covered, and it was just you know, a small hit of lightning on maybe the electrical wires to his house. I can't remember Mr. Brown, previous president's call sign, but serious as a ham. If you don't have a ground system that's absolutely perfect, disconnect your radios when you're not using them. Anyway, I've got a long time. Are there any other RF check-ins for the Mississauga before I go to Echolink?
Victor Echo 3 Whiskey Yankee Delta Peter.
I copied Peter. Anybody else in Mississauga?
Victor Echo 3 Golf X-Ray Victor, Ihor.
Okay, first person, Peter, come ahead, and I'll take the other gentleman after you. This is Jim in Toronto for the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club 2-meter net.
Hello, Jim, and everyone on net. Interested in the grounding conversations. I tried calling in earlier on my mobile from the base station, but I believe maybe I didn't have the power setting high enough. It just sounded like noise to you, I think. But I was wondering about Don's IC5200, how he's going to ground it other than having the line grounded into the house. Maybe he has to ground the chassis, I don't know, because that's a mobile unit, right? That's the same thing I have as a mobile unit, so maybe I'm having issue with grounding or something too. I switched to my base station. I'm going to drop for 1 minute. And I was also looking for digital calling channel as Brian AZA was looking for, and looking forward to field day. So back to you, Net Control. This is VE3WYD.
Well, I found out when I was using an Alinco 330MV power supply to charge batteries running my UPS, running off a generator, and I realized that amateur radio, an Alinco 330MV power supply, the negative of the power supply was a absolute zero ohm connection to the round power plug on power supply. So the power supply's negative was connected to the round pin that would go to the electrical ground. And that was a surprise to me, and I also realized that could be a problem on a radio install if your electrical ground goes through your house and your radio ground goes to direct to your ground wire, but your power supply is a link between your electrical ground and your radio ground. So, I mean, very few hams really have a proper ground set up. You know, you run a couple of ground wires and you hope for the best. Anyway, I didn't copy the call sign, but there was one other gentleman who came into the MIS over RF, and I'll pass it off to you, sir. I'm sorry I did not copy your call sign.
VE3WD, I believe it is. Jim, how you doing? VE3 Golf X-Ray Victor returning. The handle here is Ihor, India Hotel Oscar Romeo. I heard about your grounding issues on the radios. If you take a look at the SO239 connector on the back of the radios, if you take the one screw out, you can put a lug in there and then put a screw back in, have that lug soldered to a braided cord, and then feed that to your common ground in your station, and you'll have a pretty good ground system for your radio.
I'm thinking, Don, DVN, do you wish to comment? Okay, well, this is what we're waiting for now, is the run of context from Echolink. Anybody wanting to check in over Echolink? This is Jim in Toronto, VE3KIW. This is on the Amateur Radio Club 2 meter. Any Echolink contacts?
VK2DY, Robert.
I'm guessing the other Echolinks got bored waiting. VK2DY, good evening.
Good evening to you. Good morning from me. This is Robert Victor Kilo 2 Delta Yankee in Kellyville Ridge, New South Wales, but all part of the urban sprawl that is Sydney. 11:13 a.m. Wednesday morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. We'll be on Standard Time until October, and then DST returns. It is about 18 degrees Celsius. Not going to get much warmer than that. We are definitely into autumn now, and the temperatures are reflecting that. It's also going to rain, which we're entering our third year of La Nina, and no end to that in sight either. So the weather's going to be cool and wet all winter. Other than that, going to Hamfest on Saturday, largest Hamfest in the Southern Hemisphere in the central coast of New South Wales, about an hour and 15-minute drive from my front door. So looking forward to that. It's on May the 1st, and it's therefore called Mayhem. As to the question, well, I don't really have much to add to the question. Obviously, grounding earthing is important, and I try to keep all of my electronic goods protected from the odd lightning strike and that. But I don't really have a whole lot to add to the discussion, so I'll just return it to you. VK2DY, back to net.
Well, I'm going to say that VK6BQQ, why don't you come in and say good evening, because I know you're out there. I see you on the list.
Oh, golly, you can hide, but you can't get away. Yeah. Listen, in the commercial world, go to Andrews Antennas. I think they're in Whitby. Download their information on grounding. Also, Sinclair Radio Lab. And they give you a good schematic diagram, block diagram, etc. on grounding. So I would say that that'd be probably your best bet to go and research that. See what the commercial world does. It works there. It should work for the amateurs. Good to hear you in here, Jim. Yeah, just sort of sitting around on the side here.
Reg, would you not agree that for a normal, average amateur, trying to set up full bonding and grounding for the shack is a very expensive and difficult proposition?
Absolutely. I know in the commercial world, putting up towers, which I've had a bit of experience with it with Motorola and GE, thousands of dollars have been spent, and if you ever go and see one of their sites, for example, on a tower, if it's four-legged self-support, you've got four ground rods. The first mistake some people make, for example, is putting a ground rod in the cement. Not a good idea. But everything should be grounded before it comes in from the antennas, cables, etc. Now, you can get a collar that fits on your SO239 mobile. Put it on and connect a wire to it. Put a nut back on it and tighten it up. Or loosen the screw off of the connector, as the gentleman was saying, and put a ground on that. That's your best bet, I think. But yeah, grounding always and has been and will be a concern. And if you know, you get a direct hit the deck.
Reg, I was at a site and I saw them CAD welding ground rods together where the wires are surrounded by a clay pot and some thermite is put in and they light it and it burns. And the two wires come together and there's a blob of molten metal connecting them. Reg, have you ever seen CAD welding done where they burn some thermite to melt metal?
Yeah, QSL. For example, on a tower that's self-support, standing in concrete, etc., they'll put 4 ground rods in, 10 foot, drive them down. They've got a special hammer that'll do that. And then, you weld them all together. It's a loop. And then, of course, from the loop, you have a wire going to a bulkhead, which is mostly copper. And everything gets grounded to that. The antenna cables, for example, there is a clamp that goes on. You take the insulation off and go to the copper, ground it. It's grounded to the tower. The tower is grounded to the loop. It's quite a expensive process, but it seems to work. But for amateurs, put a ground rod in and ground everything to it. I wouldn't be grounding it to gas pipes, water pipes, or any other pipe in the house. Today, they use PVC pipe, which is not conductive, so it's a concern. But every situation is different, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I would say the person who doesn't have the budget to the grounds, when you're not using the radio, disconnect it. I mean, that's a poor man's solution to grounding is don't be connected when the skies are booming.
Well, not only disconnecting it, but pull your power plug out and take your antenna connector off. And don't leave that connector in such a way that it's just open air. Put a connector or a dummy load on the antenna connector itself. But, when you're disconnecting the radio, make sure the power supply is pulled from the power. Make sure your antennas are off. And the antenna connectors that you've left loose, put a dummy load on the thing. If anything blows, the dummy load will go.
I was up north in the country and big thunderstorm. And I could hear an electrical arc. And it was long, it lasted long enough for me to echo, you listen with your ears, where's this noise coming from? Something in the aerial phone line coming into my place is collecting an awful lot of electricity. And it was arcing to my electrical pipes. And I could hear this arc. Now, I'd shut off my main breakers so I didn't have power coming in. But I could still hear the electrical arc because the phone line running through the woods, it hadn't been a lightning strike, but there was a whole lot of voltage being collected on that wire, and I could hear. I mean, it was like you've seen on movies the sound of an electrical arc. Well, I could hear this in my living room, and I was able to, turn around and figure where the noise was coming from. And it was from a joint on my telephone wires to the metal pipe for my electrical. And they were a few inches apart.
Well, you know, the other thing to be concerned about is static electricity. That can give you some interesting concepts.
Somebody said the static builds up until it arcs over where it can. And if there's no other point for it to arc over, it'll arc over in your coax or in your radio receiver.
Well, that's what I say. If you've got antenna cables coming in and you pull the power and you pull the antennas off, I've seen the center conductor go to the shield and arc, carry on. That's why I say put a dummy load on the thing. But if you get a direct strike on a lightning, there's not a chance it's going to work.
Oh, I've been on the telephone when there was a hit, and the phone went boom, and then I didn't hear anything. It was a $10 electronic phone, but it got zapped. I've had radios that only had antenna and DC to them, and the little portable radio got zapped. The lightning strike was a tree 1,000 feet away. I've had a tree hit that exploded, and a root for the tree blown out of the ground. The speakers I had connected, the paper cones of the speakers were shredded, and the amplifier that was hooked up with speakers, it was toast. Luckily, I was able to replace the amplifier board, but lightning is a powerful device, and there's no semiconductors that are lightning resistant.
Well, I'll tell you, I had a shack in the back in Hamilton. I was on the radio talking to somebody, and a lightning strike come in, blew the microphone right out of my hand and threw me across the wall. And my right arm was tingling for about, I would say, a good week. I went to the doctors, and he said, yeah, you've been jolted. But, yes, you get a direct strike, well, all bets are off, as they say.
Okay, before I go to round two, anybody with any comments about lightning and electricity and stuff like that there?
VE3GXC, I have a comment there, Jim.
I almost jumped on you. Go ahead.
Yeah, when lightning strikes from overhead, it would come to your tower and probably come down your antenna. But but you have to understand that lightning is also bidirectional, and if it comes through the ground, it'll come up through your water pipes, it'll come up through your electrical ground, it'll come up through your cable TV, it'll come up through your gas lines. So you don't really know how it's going to come through your house when it goes up and out, maybe back through your antenna, and it may not come through your antenna on the roof or beside your house. It may come up through the center of your house because you've got all the piping, electrical cables, and so forth. So I thought I'd just throw that in for your thinking.
We had the top of a dresser leg splintered by lightning at the cottage. I mean, we heard the crack, and the leg of the dresser was splintered at the top of it. We don't know where the lightning came in, but it splintered the leg of a dresser.
Yeah, Roger. I'm not sure. You see, I've worked in this business for a number of years, and I've seen it go both ways. In construction on apartment buildings, it sometimes passes from the ground going up into the clouds through the corners of the building, where you'll see the girders and so forth where they end, and vice versa. It'll come up back the other way as well. So you never know which way it's going. most electrical services. It's always lightning always wants to take the shortest route to and from the clouds. So that's the way it works.
VE3MIS repeater.
I remember my grandmother seeing what is then described as ball lightning. And I don't know where she was, but she described basically a ball of light moving across a room.
That could be from ionized gases around in the area, and you can also see that balls of not lightning, but balls of gases glowing in I guess it would be in ponds or marshes as well. The E3GXC listening.
Okay, before I move to round two, anybody else want to join us? Oh boy, I lost my list. I'm just going to, I mean, to kick off round two, I'm going to throw it up in the air, and I'm going to say that the question for tonight is, do you think you're adequately protected from lightning? I'm going to have to throw it up in the air. I do know the first check-in was Brian, the A3AZA.
VE3JW, this is VA3AZA. Well, Jim, a good question. Lots of good discussion too here about lightning. My answer is no. I am not adequately protected against lightning. No, most definitely not. There's a tiny bit of protection from some static charge and such, but how well it would weather that kind of event, I couldn't be too certain. So I guess it's something you always think about. And of course, with lightning, I guess because of the frequencies involved, you just don't know what's going to get, what sort of charges are going to be induced where. So it's so highly unpredictable. Anyway, that's my answer to your question. Good net, lots of interesting discussion. VA3AZA over to VE3JIW.
Well, I think Don VE3DBN has left us. But Don, would you like to come back to E3DBN for the net round two? Okay, well, Don's up here. Sasha, I can remember your name, Sasha. YSN, VE3YSN, good evening.
KD9MSI.
MSI, I'll remember you. Brian, VE3XBH, hello.
VE3JIW, VE3XBH. Well, not much else. Like I say, if you a direct strike, I don't think there's much you can do about it. There's lightning is going to take the easiest path to ground, and there's so much power there. It doesn't matter how big the conductor is. It's going someplace. So I think Reg had it all hit the deck. But thanks for the net, Jim. I'll say 7-3 to everybody. Have yourself a good week. Stay safe. And we'll probably be talking to you next week. The E3JIW from the E3XBH.
Okay, very good, Brian. Thank you. E3WYD. Good evening. VA3, Tango Zulu. Welcome to the group. I see you in here. Hello, Jacques.
Oh, good evening, Jim. This is VA3TTZ. I just joined after listening for a while about grounding. There's The term lightning arrestor, I think, is misleading because if it's a lightning that hits your antenna, you're kaput. I think it only arrests the DC charge. Over.
Yeah, well, Jacques, you remembered your ground rods when you drove them in. Do you remember how easily the ground rods were driven down once you had the tool to do it? I know you installed some decent ground rods for your installation.
VE3GIW, VA3PZ. Yes, Jim, I have an 8-foot-long ground rod into the ground with your very useful tool. I think it took at least 20 minutes, maybe half an hour to drill it down to about 7.5 feet, and then it stopped. So that was good enough. And I did break your adapter in doing so, but I did replace the parts. So you should be good for the next person who wants to borrow it. But yeah, it was an 8-foot ground rod. I only have one, and I only using the dipole outside. Over.
Well, that drill hasn't been used since you borrowed it. Like, it's been sitting absolutely quiet, but I know I started trying to drive ground rods with a hammer, and it was just futile. You know, you hit with 50 times, it moves a quarter inch.
Yeah, Jim, you definitely saved my day when you let me use your tool. I have clay around the house, so it was very, very difficult. The trick with the water hose, that would not have worked. With clay, it's just not possible. So the impact, some sort of impact industrial drill that you had, really, really saved my day. I do have a quick question. When people say disconnect, I know you mean from outside. I'm assuming you are disconnecting the coax from before the lightning arrestor. And if so, what do you do with the coax? You just let it loop out of the box and towards the ground, or you leave the disconnected coax in the box? Over.
Well, let's see. If you have a ground connection to the coax before it comes into the house, you would just disconnect it from the radio. But if the coax has no ground anywhere else where it comes into the shack, you'd maybe want to have a connection point to ground where you could connect the coax. You just want somehow, if, you know, millions of volts comes down the coax, it can get to ground. If you don't have any ground connection to coax, that coax sitting loose on your desk, it could arc over to your router, your computer, or your camera, or your any device you have. Near the end of that coax could be zapped if you don't have any ground connection. So if you're going to disconnect the coax, there's some stupid idea that people have. Well, put the coax in a glass, you know, the end of the coax in a glass bottle. No, seriously, somehow, somewhere there has to be a wired ground connection to coax before it comes into your house. You disconnect it for radio, it'll save your radio. But have some ground connection on that coax, somewhere between the antenna and your operating desk.
Yeah, Jim, so I do have the ground connection outside. I always disconnect from the radio. However, I'm sure it's better to disconnect from outside, even if I have a ground connection. The arcing from coax in the house, even if I have a ground outside, I think it could still be arcing inside the house. I like Red's suggestion to put your coax into a dummy load when, in addition to disconnecting. Over to you, Jim.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, up north, I got so many trees that are taller than my antenna, so I really didn't think I'd get hit by the antenna. I left my antenna connected to my radio all through the winter. I came up in the spring and my radio was still alive, but that's because the trees that are taller than my antenna are probably higher. I mean, I've been sitting at the place up north on a thunderstorm and heard a boom, and this branch falls to the ground, and the branch is it's green pine, yet I can snap it like it's old pine. All the moisture has been blasted out of this branch, and the lightning has blown up the branch and fallen to the ground. But this pine tree is taller than my antenna, so my antennas are not the tallest point around. But if you've got an antenna that is the highest thing around, it's probably going to get hit.
VE3MIS here. Yeah, my dipole is low, I think, about 14 to 15 on the ground. And houses that are higher than that. So that's the environment is just this week I purchased a replacer box. So to replace the little thing I have outside so that I can go and physically connect to the box on the outside. It's a box and enclosure that's open easily. I'm supposed to have now four screws, not practical. So that's my little spring project. This is the 3 over to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the station coming in on RF. It's all noise. Sorry for that copy. I asked Echolink station to stand by. I didn't write down the call sign, but you know who you are. On Echolink, welcome to the Mississauga 2-meter net. Okay, there is a WI or a YI station over Echolink. Come back. Okay, anybody anywhere want to check in before we close the net 9:45?
KD9 MSI. This is Scott in central Missouri. I was just listening to your talk about grounding, and it's something that I've really struggled with as a fairly new hand. 73 to everyone. That's the net control.
Well, thank you, Scott. did you find the most difficult thing was finding the material, or the cost of material to do your bonding and grounding? Hello, Scott. MSI didn't copy your prefix, but good evening from Jim in Toronto. VE3JIW, Mississauga Amateur Radio Club, 2 Meter Net. Hello, Scott.
KD9 MSI. I haven't grounded anything yet, so I was real curious about the necessity to ground. Thanks a lot. Back to Net Control.
Somebody's tried, and you're very noisy on RF, so I can't help you. But Scott, yeah, you realize the complexity of grounding and bonding. See, grounding is when you run the wire to ground to your 10-foot pipe driven down to the ground. Bonding is when you connect everything else together. So, I mean, you're in the U.S. of A., so you can check out the electrical code, what is it, NFC 70? I mean, you can check out your local electrical code, and they can list the requirements for bonding and for grounding, which are sort of two different things. Okay, well, I'm going to be putting the ribbons on it in a moment. Before I do that, does anybody have any last comments or last check-ins? This is Jim in Toronto for the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club 2 Meter Net.
VE3JIW VK6BQQ, just for information, you might want to, in your location or anybody's location, check out your weather, what it's been doing lightning-wise for the last 10 years. A lot of areas are prone and get more strikes than others, but yeah, bonding is very important. I had a question last week and still getting some emails back from it. What's the difference between narrowband and wideband? And we're still trying to figure that out. So, lots of luck with this lightning. You're playing with Mother Nature. 7-3. Have a great one. VK 6BQQ Australia.
Well, thank you very much, Reg. But I mean, when I leave my place up north, I have everything unplugged. I leave a fridge and freezer on. But everything else is unplugged. My sister, the other side of the lake, they leave everything connected. They've had nothing disappeared. I've lost telephones, I've lost alarm systems, I've lost little transformers, I've lost little radios. I've had my share of stuff being zapped when I'm not there. I mean, my beautiful stereo, one of its inputs got zapped. I heard the explosion inside the stereo where one of its inputs got zapped. And I looked at the board and I couldn't find a failure, but I've had lots of failures due to nearby lightning hits. Nothing direct, just in the area.
Sounds like Mother Nature didn't like you.
No, Mother Nature thinks I'm a good conductor. And I can't get hired by the Boston Pops, but she still thinks I'm a good conductor.
QSL. Talk to you later.
Okay, so this is my duties for the net. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you have any comments, VE3MIS at rac.ca, VE3MIS at rac.ca. And if you want to complain to me, you can find me on QRZVE3JIW. Thanks for checking into the Mississauga Amateur Radio Club 2 meeting net. Remember, 7 p.m. Thursday, our club net. Followed at 7:30, our link into the Burlington Amateur Radio Club. Sad to say, Aries has become a non-event because none of the agencies want to talk to amateur radio operators, but Mississauga Amateur Radio Club, VE3MIS Charlie Alpha, we're active, we're progressive, and we're keeping radioactive in Mississauga. 7-3 from Kim, Victor Echo 3, Juliet India Whiskey, Toronto. Yeah, I live in Toronto on the edge of Mississauga. Take care, guys.